Hi, my name is Klau. Welcome to the channel. I'm currently a product manager at Uber Eats in the San Francisco Bay Area. Prior to that, I was part of Uber's associate product management program, and I was a product management fellow for Kleiner Perkins. The KP Fellows Program is an internship program that brings together students from all across the country with high growth, high potential startups and companies here in Silicon Valley. This is the start of a series of videos where I talk about how to get a job in tech as a product manager, starting with how to properly write a resume.
Maximum effort.
A well-written resume is by far the easiest and most low-effort way for you to stand out in the application process. But guaranteed, most of you are probably doing it wrong, and you're not getting as many interviews as you want because of it. But it's not your fault. Like, where are you going to learn how to do that? School? By the end of this video, you will not write a bad resume intentionally ever again. Specifically, we're going to go over the basic principles behind how to write a good resume, proper resume format and structure so it's easy for recruiters to read, how to write impactful bullets that position your past experience in the best possible way, how to control what I call your resume power level so that you don't burn out from writing resumes, specific resume writing tips for product management roles for those of you interested in specifically product management, how to write a cover letter, and at the end, I'll talk about how you can critique your own resume and continually improve it by yourself so that you don't have to blow up my inbox as inevitably happens every PM recruiting cycle. Let's get started. So let's start with the basics.
Remember your firebending basics, Prince Zuko. They are your greatest weapons.
There are three principles you need to understand. First is to be concise. Think about your resume like an ad where you are the product, and you need to state your value proposition loud and clear right from the get-go, because this ad, your resume, only gets viewed for 6 seconds on average. That's like 1 more second than the 5 seconds you waited before you skipped the ad before this video. The second is relevance. It should be immediately obvious as to why your experience, the way you've laid it out, puts you in a good position to take on the role that you're applying for. And the third one is impact. In your resume, you're going to talk about a lot of different things you did across different jobs. The key thing that people always miss is that you have to explain why those things they did are important for the business, for the organization, for them. That context needs to be clear. And the last thing before I get into the details is expectation setting. Generally speaking, a good resume takes around 5 to 10 hours to write, usually spaced across 2 to 3 working sessions so that you're not totally like brain dead. And with that, now let's talk a bit about what these principles actually mean in practice. So the first thing is resume structure. Always put your full name at the top, along with an email, maybe a phone number if you're comfortable. And if you have an online portfolio, you can also put the link there as well. Your resume is going to be 1 page. In 6 seconds, the recruiter isn't actually reading, they're skimming. If there's a lot of things to skim through, they're going to miss the really important, relevant stuff. If your concern is that you don't have a lot of highly related experiences to highlight, trust me that throwing more words at the problem is not going to help. You need to own up to the fact that you don't have too much relevant experience and instead lean into demonstrating that you have a lot of potential through leadership and other projects. The next thing is that your resume needs to be readable. You want to nicely space things out and don't cram everything in too densely. Your font size should never go below 10 points. Anything below 10 points is really just too small to read. If you ever have a moment where you're thinking, oh, I should extend the margins a little bit, or I should shrink the spacing between lines, that is a telltale sign that you need to trim, not that you need to make more room to squeeze things in. Now, into the actual format. Your resume section should be clear so that recruiters can easily see the organization of the page, so you should have clear, distinct sections. And you should have at most 5 sections. In order of importance, education, experience, these two are kind of your bread and butter. You always have these two, and which one you put on top depends on kind of which one is more impressive or which one is more relevant, but you always have these two. If you're in a situation where you don't have a ton of directly relevant experience, that's when you want to lean into leadership and projects as a way to kind of demonstrate your potential and your eagerness and interest in the new role or the new space. And lastly, skills. The skill section is really for putting in hard skills. So either technologies that you've worked with, for example, Python or R or JavaScript, or other like tools you've used like Figma or Sketch or Jira. Generally, you don't want to be including soft skills here. That's usually just not super relevant. Like for example, if you were to say that you're really good at communication, that's something that they'll just kind of suss out based off your actual interviews. So common things that I also see that I would view as mistakes, like some people like to put in a summary section at the top of their resume. If you put a large block of text in the beginning of your resume, first of all, it's not getting read in those 6 seconds, so it just mostly wastes space. And because you're writing full-on paragraphs, it's just not really good for efficiency. And the other thing is no hobby section. If any of your hobbies or interests are directly relevant to the job posting, they would go in the project section or the leadership section. Your resume should use the existing resume structure. In writing a resume, you want to make it as easy as possible for the recruiter to scan through your resume and extract the relevant information. And the most generic one looks like, your name and contact information at the top, then like clear sections ranked in terms of relevance and all in one column format. So now that we've talked about the structure of the resume, let's now actually talk about the content that goes into it. So underneath each section, you have essentially entries for every type of experience, right? Each entry should have 3 to 4 bullet points, and these should be the top 3 to 4 bullet points, the most interesting, most impactful things you did. And now this is where impact metrics come into play. So a good way to structure these bullet points is to follow this format of I did X thing, and that led to Y result, where ideally Y is some number, some measurable indicator of the impact that you drove. It should be obvious how Y was meaningful and why it was important for the business. So those are all the basics. Congratulations, you made it out of the basic training. Now we're gonna talk about resume power levels.
Gina, what does the scouter say about his power level?
There's really 3 that I think about. Power levels for resumes basically work in terms of a personalization and customization scale. So the higher your power level, the more customized and the more personalized the resume is going to be for a specific job. So the basic resume is just level 1 because it's not personalized to any job. It's just like a really well written, foundationally like good, like overall description of your experience. This is a resume you typically hand out to jobs that you're like okay about, you're feeling a little lukewarm. I'm not super excited, but if I got it, it would be pretty good. Level 2 is a job that you'd be pretty happy with. Like you're pretty excited. Like if you were to land this job, you would be totally happy. And you would seriously consider taking it. Level 3 is like the jobs that like you really, really want. Like I would sell a kidney for this job. That's a little intense, but they're the jobs that you want the most. And so what's kind of implicit behind the power system is also this sense of prioritization. You need to be prioritizing certain jobs over other jobs and asking yourself questions about like, you know, which are the ones that I really want, which are the ones that I kind of want, and which ones are like this would be nice.
It's time for you to look inward and begin asking yourself the big questions. Who are you? And what do you want?
Because the higher power level you go, the more effort it's going to take. If you try to go level 3 for every single job, you will 100% burn out in your job search. So only go all out for the jobs you really want. So getting into it, level 2. Level 2 is where you consider the specifics of the role and a little bit of the company. So you want to, read the job description really thoroughly, get an understanding of what they're looking for, what kind of skills and competencies do they need for this job, and how can you fill them? And also start reading about the company, like understanding what they value, some things that have been going on recently in the press, like about their latest releases. And the first implication of this is the ordering of everything. So you should organize your sections with respect to relevance to the job. Different jobs essentially appreciate different kinds of flex. Even if the most relevant thing you've done is like a volunteer experience, that should go at the very top. The other thing to note is even within the sections, you should no longer organize things chronologically. Like if your most relevant work experience is actually from 3 years ago, you should still put the most relevant thing up top. The second implication is the groupings. You might actually switch things out of say like leadership section or the project section into the experience section if you think it's particularly relevant for the role. Maybe you worked in a particular sector before, but it was in like a smaller capacity and it was a long time ago, and so you decided not to put it in originally. But if it's an experience that's relevant to this new position, it should absolutely be swapped back in. People often think that experience is only work experience, like paid work experience, but really it's any experience, and you're kind of free to mix and match and figure out how you want to structure everything and position it. And so that's kind of level 2. You can kind of get a sense of why it's a little more intense. And for level 3, we're going to take that up a notch even more. Now you want to get to the point of researching the specific team, getting an understanding of what their team's specific needs are. Reach out to people on LinkedIn, message your friends, trying to get in that network. Read up on a couple of blogs. There's usually quite a few. I can link some here that usually do good strategic analysis about some of the larger tech companies. Your ultimate goal is to get in touch with the actual hiring manager. And that's the person who's actually behind the scenes. Like if you got this job, you would report to this person. You want to be able to meet this person, start to build rapport with them, get an understanding of what they're looking for in the role. So you can start to piece together how you can best position yourself to the actual decision maker, which is the most game-changing thing you can do by far. So some more concrete things you might want to learn is like, is this a new team that needs someone to provide strategic direction? Is this kind of a veteran team that just wants someone to be able to come in, hit the ground running, really be productive from the get-go? Is it a company that just recently hit product market fit and so they're trying to grow and scale as much as possible? Are they trying to bring in new knowledge from like an existing base? Like for example, if a company is making its first foray into advertising, it makes sense that they want someone with actual ads expertise to come into the org, figure out how they should build an ad strategy.
Don Draper and Ted Shaw.
Writing resumes for each of these scenarios is slightly different. If the goal is to move fast and you want to highlight experiences where you had to like work with a scrappy team, tight deadlines, really just executed hard. Startup experience is probably very valid here. If it's the other one and it's more like strategic direction and alignment, then you might want to highlight your strategic work instead. Like, you know, if you had a consulting project, for example, and you really had to go into an ambiguous space and help somebody figure out what was the next move, or maybe it was your own club or nonprofit that you had to really like, you know, craft a narrative, craft a vision, and then like convince all your teammates to go execute on it, things like that. And is it a role that's targeted at new grads? No expectations for previous experience, but they want to make sure you learn quickly and that you're excited about the role. That could be totally different as well. Like you'd highlight projects where, you know, you started from scratch, but you're like a self-starter. You're able to figure out what you needed and then you went out and got it in terms of, you know, doing research or finding other mentors. You're someone that can like be thrown into the deep end and just figure it out. So that's how you kind of want to use all this understanding to really refine your resume for level 3. You can kind of see why it is level 3 though, because all this stuff I mentioned takes a long time. You can't really do that for every single job. So now let's talk about product management resume specific tips. So this almost goes without saying, but the most relevant thing for PM roles is actual PM experience. And so obviously if you have previous product experience, that should go right up at the top. If you haven't, that's the much more trickier situation. The next best thing you got is to approximate it as best as possible. The 3 ways that you can position this the best is entrepreneurial experience, which can be actually like, you know, you starting a company, but really you starting anything. Nonprofits, a Shopify site, growing an Instagram page, like a TikTok, like anything like that, where you had to, you know, come up with an idea and a vision and execute on it, ideally with a team. In that same vein is like technical experience, being able to demonstrate that you've A, worked in the industry, and B, have, you know, actually been on the ground building things from scratch is also very valuable. I don't think that it's like necessary. If you have technical experience, 100% lean into it. If you don't, I wouldn't beat yourself up too much about it. And so the third one is consulting experience. Anytime that you've had to really provide structure to unstructured situations, come up with like a vision and a strategy, and then execute on it in some way, ideally with a team, is going to be really beneficial for your application. To sum it all up, you really just want to think about, you know, what the PM role entails, and then trying to demonstrate that you have different pieces of that from other experiences in the best way possible. Either working on a side project, even like a personal website, going to a hackathon, any way you can get into that mix of, I was the person that, you know, coordinated these other people who were technical or not technical to solve this problem. Anything like that is going to be your go-to if you don't have actual product experience. And that's how I would frame it as well. I think the cool part about this is, especially the entrepreneurial piece, anyone can do that. The other thing that I would mention is emphasizing leadership experience and any project experience. There's a lot of things to highlight from joining an existing team. The fact that you can integrate well, you're a team player, you can kind of take an existing strategy, which is usually what happens, develop a small piece of it and then execute on it with a team. That's also what you want to generally highlight if you're someone in a leadership role in an existing organization. And then projects, ideally this is what you use to flex like technical acumen, because ideally the projects you worked on are technically based. And again, the thing I would highlight is you came up with this interesting idea, you were able to execute on it. And then the last piece, of course, which goes back to the impact metrics, is, you know, what did this thing do? For PM resumes in particular, impact metrics are like, they have to be your bread and butter. The ability to articulate complex things concisely, key PM competency. Being able to communicate why something was important and using data to back that up, key PM competency. So all that's to say, for PM resumes in particular, you really got to double down on the impact metrics. So moving on to cover letters, which really should be called cover paragraphs, because the best cover letters are really only a few sentences long. But I get that doesn't really have the same oomph to it. If you decide to add a cover letter, which is, by the way, a level 3 move, and you'll see why, it should follow the following format. The first 2 lines should succinctly describe the value you bring to the table. And it should go something like this. Dear employer, I know that you have this problem. This is why I'm uniquely positioned to help you solve it. The second 2 lines should describe why you want the job. You should be honest, because these people can smell BS from like a mile away. Again, the ideal structure is along the lines of, I want to learn this unique skill that your company is very good at. Here are some examples of how I've already started to learn that, and I want to learn even more, even faster by working with the experts. Or something like, I think, you know, you as a product manager or a senior engineer or really anything like a writer or a chef are really like thought leader, industry expert, and I really want to learn from you. And then finally, you should close with a call to action, which is, would love to pick this up over a quick phone call. If you have like 10, 15, 30 minutes, send me an email, something short and concise at the end. And the reason why a cover letter is actually a level 3 move is because you need to do a lot of research into the company's current state, what their priorities are, what their focus is, and then you really need to be concise about how you message it and what experiences you pull from that can succinctly, speak to those points. It takes a lot of effort to condense all that into, like, say 5 lines. And the other thing to mention here is cover letters are the most effective when you can get them to a hiring manager. They're definitely the ones feeling the pain the most. And the point of the cover letter is to come in and just say, I can address these for you. Cool. And my last little bit of advice for you is how to do your own resume critiques. So here's how you do it. After you go through the process of writing the actual resume, you want to read every single bullet point over and then ask yourself the question, so what? Why does this matter? And every time you ask, you have to make an edit. You have to, like, take something out or add in a number or a metric, something. Go through that and then ask yourself again, so what? Now do that for every single bullet point of your entire resume 3 to 5 times. And I guarantee you, after the process, your resume will be bulletproof.
Handle us. You'll handle us. You know your predecessors had much more respect. Okay, you have some skill.
Literally, when people ask me for resume critiques, that process is what happens. Someone sends me their resume. The first thing I usually say is, you need impact metrics, like literally 99 out of 100 times. And then the next thing I say is, you need to address the so what. And so I'll literally go through their points and be like, okay, why does this matter? Why is this important? Why is that important? They'll go back and make some edits, give it back to me, and then I'll say it again. And so literally, you can just do it for yourself. You don't need me to read it for you. So yeah, give that one a shot. Let me know how it goes. I hope you enjoyed this video on how to impress tech recruiters with your resume. I really hope you're able to incorporate some of these ideas and get more interviews out of your resume. If you've made it this far into the video, hopefully you found this useful and helpful. If you did, would love a like. Comment down below one thing that you found useful, and subscribe for more future videos around career, product management, and just my struggles as a 20-something trying to adult. And actually, if you are interested in me doing a resume critique for your resume, leave a comment with the hashtag critique please, and I'll do like a random selection of folks, because I think it would be cool in a follow-up video to do a live edit in a resume writing section. I'll be good about blurring out people's names so I don't call anybody out, but I think it would be useful for you and everybody else watching this video. I'll see you next time.